in banking. And it looks like, okay. And I think, it's important because it's asking me to acknowledge. I think it's important because oftentimes in our lives, we go through pivot points where the trajectory of our life changes. And you kind of only know that in retrospect, how important it was at that moment. And if you go back through your life and you think about those times when something changed, it may not have been as obvious at the time as it is in retrospect. So I always like to start by going back to 1994. And I'm thinking that Shusheen, when were you born?
I was born in 2000, Frank.
Okay, so I'm dating myself.
Thanks, Frank.
But, at the time I was a 28-year-old Blackhawk pilot in the US Army. I spent my whole life being around the military with the exception of the 4 years in college. And I was living on this island of Cyprus in the Mediterranean. Just picture white sandy beaches, clear water, absolutely fantastic. A destination for people from the Middle East, from Europe, all over for fun. It was a playground, but it was also a place where we had operations that were running in and out of the Middle East. So we lived on this Royal Air Force base called Akrotiri, a British Royal Air Force base, and we would fly in and out of Beirut, Lebanon at night to support the embassy there. So the great part of the mission was that in the day, we were allowed to just go about our ways. It was kind of low profile. You could wear beach shorts. It was sort of like Tammy and Kelly are living down in Belize, just a wonderful existence. And at night we did these missions and they were right out of the magazine, night vision goggles, low level flying, all in the dark. It was exactly what a 28-year-old Blackhawk pilot should be doing. It was adventurous. It was exact. And I didn't even think of anything else in my life. I enjoyed the people that I was around. And so we flew a mission the night before, and then the next day we were sitting on the beach. It was me and 3 other aviators. And this gentleman walks up to us, and he's a very nice Greek Cypriot. And he said, "Are you guys American?" And we said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, I live in America now. I just finished my MBA at Columbia Business School, and I'm about to start a job as an investment banker for JP Morgan." I remember all of us with a puzzled look on our face, like, what the hell is investment banking? And it was significant because it was the first time I even started to be interested in anything other than what I was doing. And I make this point because he started to relay his experiences and what he was going into. And the juxtaposition with us, the 4 Americans who on several nights during the week were risking our hides going in and out of the Middle East on behalf of our country, free markets, enterprise, capitalism, that American slice of the pie. It was interesting that this fellow was telling us all about the apple pie that he was about to get on Wall Street. So it just sparked enough of an interest where after finishing talking to him, over the next 2 years, I started to do more research. And about 2 years from that moment, I drove off the post at Fort Benning, Georgia, which was my last duty assignment, and I headed for the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill to get my MBA, and that was 1996. I left the military in what I knew very well because there was something else out there that I had an interest in. And so one of the greatest things that we can do is recognize when these pivot points occur in our life, this trajectory change. And then you have to close one chapter and then go for it on the next one. And when I drove off that base, I was in a white Ford Ranger truck, no AC, no radio. I had a little boom box sitting on the dashboard. I had enough money to go through 1 year of school, and then I was going to live on ramen noodles, and the second year I was going to figure it out. And it worked, right? And it worked because it set me on a different course. And the important thing is many of you will go through moments like that in your life, and it's okay. It's okay to have a little bit of anxiety, like how's this going to play out? But you have to learn how to balance the fear of failure and the fear of going into the unknown with the fear of regret. I always feel like I would rather be, I want to be morbid here, on my deathbed, I would rather, be able to say, I went for it, than to say, I wish I would have tried to do this and that. Now that's something that you have to train your mind to do. You have to learn how to have comparative fear. And what I mean by comparative fear is the fear of failure versus the fear of regret, right? The fear of regret now is scarier to me than the fear of failure. And part of that is the lessons that I've learned, and we'll talk about a little bit more as we go through this. But I like to start off with that story because I want to give you the context of, I wasn't a guy that grew up in a country club or grew up going to investment banking dinners. My father was a 36-year military veteran. My mother was a homemaker, wisest person I ever met. And I'll tell you some stories and lessons I learned from her. But the important point is, you cannot go through your life with the fear of going into the unknown. And the way that I always wrestle with that, I told you about comparative fear. The other thing that I always say to myself is, you know, you have to recognize that we have a very finite time on this planet. If you think about the age of the universe, it's like 14 billion. We have a scientist, 14 billion years old. They think that, and if you think of Earth, it's 5 billion, 4.7 billion years old. And then if you think about, you know, the lifespan of, you know, human history, you know, we're talking tens of thousands of years. And then you and I probably get 85, 80, maybe. I have a mother that's 98. She's outliving. But the point is, we are literally just sand going through an hour. It's very finite. So you have to decide whether in your life you want to attack life and think about life as, you know, an experience, a series of chapters, right? The book that I wrote is about one chapter. It's about my military chapter. Or if you want to play it too cautiously. Now, I'm not condoning someone being reckless, right? I think you map out your plan, and then, you know, as Tammy and I have talked about, you know, you want to make sure you're going after life, because the number one thing that you want is success and fulfillment, not success and misery. And we'll touch that a little bit later. But Tammy, I thought that would be a good opening. You tell me where you'd like to go from here.
So, you know, making that transition from fighter pilot to investment banker, and then from investment banker, where they eat their young, right? I mean, let's face it, it's a pretty competitive space, to being in the HR field, looking after and caring for the people in that space. You know, at the Career Winner Circle, we are so much about helping people make big career changes. You know, when you find that what you've done for so long no longer serves you and you want to do something different, making those pivots is a journey that we help a lot of people with. Yeah. So how did you decide to make those changes? We talked a little bit about your beachside experience in terms of welcome to investment banking, but during your career, how did you make that change?
Life is an evolution, right? And you learn more as you go. And the number one thing that I always recommend, and Shashim will hear me talking about this a lot when he comes to work for me this summer, is the number one thing that you can do is have a really good handle on, you know, yourself. Introspection. Most achievers do not spend enough time. Most of you probably do not spend enough time in your life thinking about yourself. And I don't mean that in a selfish way. Most of us as achievers are looking for targets. Okay, I got good grades in school. I got to get into a good college. Got in good college. I got to get a good internship. Good internship. I got to get a job. It's always like, what's the next target? And rarely do people in the early years of their life, which is when you really should do it, stop, pause, and say, what are my dominant attributes? Those things that always seem to emerge no matter whatever endeavor I'm in. Are you deeply analytical? Are you empathetic? Are you someone that's physically involved? In other words, you like doing things with your hand. Do you have the ability to perceive how other people are feeling? Like, everyone has a set of talents. Very unique dominant attributes. And when you think attributes, don't just think what is good. That's the flaw. It's not good or bad. Michael Jordan had a dominant attribute of being a perfectionist and demanding. And if he was an 8th grade school teacher, people would have probably thought he was really bad at his job. But because he was a world-class athlete going after championships, working with other elite athletes, that dominant attribute resulted in 6 NBA championships. And so the number one thing you can do is really figure out what your dominant attributes are. And the easy way to do that is you talk to people who have been around you. You don't ask them what you should do with your life. You ask them what they have observed over all the years they've been around you. And if you go back to my mother now, who is 98, and say, hey, tell me about Frank as a little kid today. He was a leader. Like in class, he was always raising his hand. People always seemed to bring problems to him. And those kind of characteristics and attributes have been consistent throughout my life. Now, the key is to figure out those attributes and then figure out where are they most valued in society, right? Because the frustration is if your dominant attributes aren't valued in the endeavor you're in, it results in frustration. We'll touch on that in a second. The other thing I want to point out is it's not just your attributes. I think it's important when you're making these career changes in life to think about what are those times in my past where I've had a sense of fulfillment, or I felt like I was important or significant, or whatever word you want to use. And if you can get those kind of examples, and then you can dig down in and figure out if there's a common thread, you will find the filter to which you should view all future opportunities. I'll give you a quick story. During that time, I was flying Blackhawks in Central America, where Kelly and Tammy are located. We used to use Blackhawk helicopters to land in these remote villages in Guatemala and Honduras, and we would take doctors and medical teams to these small, remote, poverty-stricken villages. And I always felt a sense of happiness and fulfillment when I could land an aircraft in a crazy landing zone on the side of a mountain or in a triple canopy jungle. And when we landed, the doctors and medical teams would run out and set up their tables for villagers lined up. And I just had this feeling like, wow, my unique talents are impacting others in a positive way. That thread, impacting others in a positive way, whether it's real or not, is just perceived by me, is what drives me. It's why I said yes to Tammy when she said, do you want to do this? And so to the extent you can take very different experiences in your life and figure out if there's a common thread that connects them, you have the secret for what will make you happy in the future. You have to deal with things that in the past have been consistent with you being fulfilled and you having a sense of significance. Specifically, Tammy, the way I went from, I told you how I went from a helicopter pilot to someone in banking, but that's not the whole story. There were a lot of struggles. Early on, I missed the camaraderie, I missed the esprit de corps, I missed the adventure of my past life as a military aviator. And I was sitting in a cube working 80 to 100 hours looking at a spreadsheet. And I didn't like it. And it didn't really matter if I was making multiples of the money I made before. It didn't really matter if I had an MBA now. It didn't matter if everyone in my family was proud of me and saying, oh, you made it, you made it. Inside, I didn't feel that sense of impacting others in a positive way, like I did when I was in the military, having something greater than myself, oneself. And so you have to understand throughout the journey, it hasn't just all been linear straight up. Now, how I went from being, someone that was an investment banker to someone who was on the sales and trading team, crazy trading floor, people yelling. I did that for 16 years, same bank. And now this job as a development officer, leader, manager, HR is on December 1st, 2018. I'll tell you another quick story. A good buddy of mine, Dwayne Brown, who he and I started together at the bank. Very, very sharp guy, very intelligent, played college football. At the age of 51, he looked like he could still play college football. He was really into fitness and health, had a wonderful family, was an executive vice president. He goes to the gym on December 1st, 2018, and he comes home and he's feeling a little bit odd. And he decides to go into the hospital. On the way, he has a massive cardiac arrest and dies on the side of the road, right? No one knew, he didn't know. And that event triggered in me a thought process where I said, wow, I'm a year older than him, or at the time, I said, I wonder if he thought about that in the context of this is the last year I'm on the planet. And if I didn't know that, what would I do this next year of my life? That's not a morbid thought. That's how we should all live. No one's guaranteed anything. So we have to live with intensity, with passion, with positivity, smile. Like life's too short, like walking around with your head down because someone cuts you off in traffic. It's only done when people lose the perspective. They lose the context of this day is not guaranteed. So we got to do the best to make it the best we can. So that little experience triggered in me a thought that, you know what, on January 1st, I'm going to start speaking groups. It gives me a sense of like I'm impacting others. So I said, I'm going to do 30 speeches in 2019. And I went out and I started. Well, sometime in January, someone said, man, you got a lot of decent stories. You should write a book. And so the thought came across my mind and I ran it through the filter of, would this impact others in a positive way? And I self-published a book. I had all the stories in my head. I wrote it, used Amazon KDP. If anyone has published a book, you can now do it all on just in time. You don't have to have 10,000 books in your garage like you used to. And so I published this book. And as the book went out, then people said, young people really like this Instagram 1-minute videos. And so I said, maybe I'll start doing 1-minute videos if it can impact others' lives in a positive way. And so I embarked on what Tammy was talking about. I said, hey, let's make a good challenge, 365 videos straight. Most of the time when I woke up, I didn't know what the topic was, but it taught me how to be very aware. I looked around, saw my dogs running around, saw the birds, whatever, and I started to think. And your mind, so if you have an objective and you set ambitious goals, oftentimes your intellect, your subconscious will move you towards those things. But you have to obviously liberate yourself and be okay with exposing yourself. Maybe I could have failed and not being able to generate 365. I did not have, people said, did you have all these titles lined up? No, no.
Not a chance.
Not a chance. So, I think the key, Tammy, to go back to your initial question is, the key to moving and changing career paths and really trying to live a life that is consistent with who you are is introspection, and then create a filter through which you can look at all opportunities, and the opportunity is right, be bold and go for it, understanding it's okay to fail. So let me wrap up with that, and then we'll throw it to the next question. I'm sorry.
Nope, go ahead.
Somewhere along the way, I started to recognize that the greatest learning occurred during failure and adversity. Hands down.
Yep.
If you think about the best lessons you've learned in life, they probably came with some sort of pain or embarrassment or something. And once you grasp that concept, that failure, adversity, hardship is actually what helps develop you. If you get that and you're okay with that, then you start running towards challenging situations because you recognize you either succeed, and if you don't succeed, you grow. And once I found that little secret out and I changed the way I viewed adversity and hardship, and I started to think, oh, I just grew from it. I know it's just the nuance of how you think about something, but obviously all of life is how you perceive things. Once I got that down, it allowed me to go from thing to thing without worrying about failing. If I fail, that's okay. I'll think about what I learned from it and go on to the next one.
Yeah. And I think you're spot on, Frank, in terms of we somehow along the way, we've defined failure and success as different and opposites. Whereas in reality, failure is part of success. You can't be successful without having the setbacks, without having the failures, and without having that natural resilience that comes from, getting your butt kicked once in a while, right? Depending on the size of what you're doing. And I love the point that you make in terms of playing to your strengths. So many people that I've worked with in the past and my clients focus on those things. We all have them that you don't like about yourself, that you wish you could do differently, right? Like I am the president of the Procrastinators Club, always have been, always will be. And if I could change anything about how I am, that would be the thing. But let's face it, at my age, that's not happening. So, playing to your strengths instead of putting all that time and all that energy into trying to make something that doesn't come naturally to you a little bit better, it's just such a better strategy in order to grow and succeed. So, I think those are excellent points.
Yeah, and let me just piggyback on that one point, and then we'll go on to the next question. There's a controversial approach that I have to strengths and weaknesses. I think exceptional performance is because of the presence of exceptional attributes. It's not because of the lack of weaknesses or the absence of weaknesses. Mm-hmm. So if you go through life always trying to protect your flank, as we say in the military, in other words, just focus your energy on, what are my weaknesses? How do I get better? You'll probably just have a mediocre life. Let's be honest. To be really good or exceptional or really get a lot of fulfillment out of something, you have to be focused on things that are natural strengths. And then you have to work. Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, they took 1,000 shots a day, but they also had natural attributes that allowed them. Because if I took 1,000 shots a day, I don't think I'd be winning NBA championships. And so the key is to recognize that it's not about looking at your review and finding the weaknesses and then putting all your energy and effort into making those better, because probably what you get is mediocre in those. You have to identify those areas where you have a natural competitive advantage, and then you have to put your foot on the gas and make those dominant advantages.
Yep.
And when and the key is you have to think about who you are and where you would best be suited to employ all of your energy and resources.
Excellent. Love that. Obviously, we've come off of a couple really strange years, and I don't think we're out of the woods yet. Between the inflation and interest rates and Ukraine, and maybe COVID's still a thing, maybe it's not. And who's hiring, who's not, the great resignation. There's so much craziness going on and has been. You're in an interesting position given where you are within Wells Fargo and looking across the economy at large. So where do you see the best opportunities for professional growth this year?
Well, okay, that's a great question. And the question focuses on what's going on externally, right? Mm-hmm. Which is, obviously, we have to know our environment. We have to see where opportunities are opening. But I could give you the secret, okay, this technology investment, let's say Shushin, I say, hey, you really want to focus on the technology space. But if he has not demonstrated a real interest in technology, for example, then even if I serve up a great opportunity to him, he won't succeed, because there's three things that it takes to become successful. And this is the filter that I use to interview anyone. The first is someone's capacity to do the work. So let's say in finance, you'd have to be analytically rigorous. You'd have to be intellectually curious, good with quantitative numbers, right? Able to solve complex problems. It doesn't matter if I go to someone, if they don't have those attributes, or if they don't have the inclination to do those things, or never show to demonstrate a capacity to do those. It really doesn't matter if I put them in front of that opportunity, because they're not going to succeed because they don't have the capacity. The second thing that I always look at when I'm interviewing someone is, have they demonstrated an interest in the business, right? If you want to be a firefighter, you better be interested in running in the building and saving someone's life. If you're not, it doesn't matter if you're strong and you can carry a big pack and you have an axe. You probably are not going to succeed because you don't have the interest. In finance, in any job, you have to want to read about it. You want to have to learn about it. You have to want to talk about it. And so when you ask me where are the opportunities for growth, a lot of it has to do with what are you interested in? Because we have to tailor a customized solution for each person. And then the last filter that I always look at is, do they have the desire to do this? We used to, everyone wants to be a Navy SEAL until they drown you 5 times in training, right? Or they open up the doors at 30,000 feet and you have to jump out over the ocean in the dark. Everyone's like, I don't really think I want to be a Navy SEAL like that. So desire is so important. You cannot chase great opportunities if you don't have the desire to put in the work. So back to your original question, where are the opportunities? I think if you just laid them out and you did have natural attributes and the interest in these types of things, we know that there's an evolution of technology that is radically changing how we all live. Look at what we're doing now. We're now comfortable talking on a Zoom to people in different parts of the world, Belize, Charlotte, New York, etc. We know that technology is going to continue to change how we do work and where we do work. So if you think about opportunities, they probably deal with someone who's a knowledge-based worker, because the work can be farmed out anywhere. And so you have to figure out how you can utilize the evolution of technology to your advantages. Obviously, there are things going on geopolitically. We have a war in Ukraine, which is going to create opportunities for alternative sources of energy. Let's say you're someone that has really good technical skills and you like working on things. You don't necessarily want to be a knowledge worker, but you're really good at building and working and use. Well, why not try to become certified in solar panel design or certified in installing solar panels? I have a buddy of mine, Justin, who was a U.S. Marine for 5 years, got out, became an electrician, has a solar panel business now, and he's making millions of dollars because he installs these massive fields for these big energy companies. He didn't have a natural education for it. He just found an opportunity that was growing fast. So back to your question, where are the opportunities? Look around you, what's going on? We know retail's starting to decline, right? So I wouldn't put all my hopes on working in a store, right? I would say, how is the retail business shifting? We all order online now, right? We all know there has to be delivery, there have to be drones. So think about it, not in the context, what one opportunity? Think about, what do I project forward in the next 10 years to be the significant changes, trajectory of life? And it's really easy for young people to do that. If you're in college and you say to people, hey, can I borrow 10 bucks from you? They're like, yeah, I'll Zelle it to you, or I'll Venmo it to you. And you're like, no, I just want a 10 spot. You got a 10 spot? Like old people like me, we still carry cash. No one carries it. Like my daughter and my sons, they're like, what? Like that's like so dinosaur. No one carries cash anymore. So we know there are some trends. And so the number one thing to do is think about where this is all going. Tammy, you figured out an amazing path of growth. You said, you know what? I can go live in Belize, and because of the utilization of technology, I can touch, impact, coach, share my lessons with people who are in Alaska, right? You're no longer thinking about it on a geographic basis. I live in this city, so all my customers are in the city. So that's more of an example of how I would think about opportunities going forward. But again, the opportunity is only good if it's a fit for you and you're willing to pay the price. You have the interest and the desire to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think universally with all of the new things that are happening and our world is always changing, there's always problems to solve. And the people who can use their skills to really bring in those solutions, even if you've never done the actual work before, but you've been through similar situations that you can bring into a new environment, that's really where you start to level up within the organization. So if you've worked in an emerging field before and been able to take things from concept, into mainstream, then there's no reason those skills cannot be reused in today's environment where we've got some, the newer technologies, the newer financial instruments, and all of those things that are happening. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for us, old people and the young ones too, to dust off those skills that really we take for granted and the experiences that we have in helping our organizations grow and mature in some of these new ways, which is always fun to see what's coming up and how can we start to play in those fields.
Yeah, you mentioned something that's really important, and I say this to all of the junior bankers when they arrive. The number one way to add value to any individual relationship, any corporate relationship, anywhere in your life is to listen closely and identify what problems need to be solved, and then utilizing your energy and focus to solve other people's problems. To the extent you're solving really important people's problems, you become very relevant.
Yeah.
I was at an offsite once at Wells Fargo, and the CEO was there. And he and I ended up on a bike ride together, so we were talking as we were riding. It was a way to reward employees who they thought were doing a good job. It was like a 3-day, outing. It was in Coronado. So we're having fun. We're out there, and I'm talking to Tim Sloan, who was the CEO of Wells Fargo at the time. And so he knew I had a military background in this conversation. He goes, yeah, we're trying to grow our, military population, veterans that are on our payroll now, from 8,000 to 20,000, in the next 5 years. And I listened to that. Ooh, that's a good one, right? And I went back to my hotel that night and I wrote a whole plan on how we would do it. And I emailed the CEO directly. And he responded in 5 minutes. The CEO of Wells Fargo, 280,000 people. And all of a sudden I became relevant. He then put me to other people. He knew I was interested in being involved. And because I was worried about solving his problem and not how he could help me solve mine, like if you get on an elevator with someone, you shouldn't be thinking, how can I get help from that person? You should say, what can I do to help this person's life get better? And in return, they'll reciprocate. And you'll have a real network and real relationships when people want to help you because you want to help them. And that's always the key to networking. They have to be genuine relationships. And that's why Tammy and I hit it off, because I said, hey, how can I help you? She said, hey, how can I help you? And today we recognize that together we can make things better by helping each other out. That's where you want to go. Solve other people's problems.
Absolutely. Wonderful. And then time for one or two more questions, and then we're going to open it up for Q&A as well. So what is one common myth about leadership that you want to debunk?
Okay, so I say this to veterans all the time. The common myth about leadership is it's always valuable. Now you're like, oh, Frank, don't say that. This is a leadership call.
Yeah.
The number one flaw that veterans make, because when we're in the military, we're all thinking, okay, I need to be able to take command. I need to be able to lead. And there's a huge premium placed on leadership throughout the whole military organization. But here's the catch. When you're in the civilian world, you've gone from the military command and control to one persuasion and influence. And oftentimes, a particular job will not value leadership in, let's say, the top or three attributes. For example, let's say I'm hiring someone to be a quant, someone that's going to run algorithms on what's going on in the US or the global trading markets. Now, I know that person is going to have to be intellectually a powerhouse. They're going to have to be creative, and they're going to have to be interested in solving problems. And they're going to have to be okay sitting in that cube over there, solving the most complicated problems. The truth is, I really don't care if he cannot lead his way out of a paper bag, right? Leadership is not always valued at the highest levels. Now, I don't want you to misunderstand this. For our veterans, I value leadership as a human quality, but every job I hire for, I don't place it at the same priority. So leadership might be number 6 when I'm hiring an analyst. I really want to know if they can solve complicated problems, if they can work long hours, if they can get along with others. And maybe as they evolve in the organization and they become a manager or a leader, then I start to say, now, which of those analysts who could master the quantitative analytical also have natural leadership qualities? So the number one myth about leadership is it's always valuable. Now, I want to step back 1 second. I'm not talking about personal leadership. If you can't lead yourself, and I'm talking about discipline and how you conduct your life, how you eat, how you, take care of yourself, your health, how you study, then that quality of leadership, personal leadership, is so important, because no one wants to be around someone without discipline, without the approach to lead themselves. My only point was, just because someone led a battalion in combat, 500 people, does not mean they're going to be a good market quant or research analyst. And so we have to understand there's a difference in the qualities that are valuable to succeed in a particular job. Now, if you have amazing leadership qualities, the number one thing to do is pick a path where leadership is valued at the highest level, right? So, a lot of military guys come out and they're great as area managers for Amazon, and they're running 5 warehouses, and those warehouses are running like clockwork. They don't necessarily have to automatically go into a field where it's not valued, because oftentimes that leads to frustration.
Yeah, makes sense. And what's one thing you wish you had learned earlier in your career?
That you can be successful and miserable. Now everyone's like, oh my God, he's going to throw a wet blanket on this.
No, I think you're spot on with that. Keep going.
Let me walk through this. The worst outcome ever is to work 20 years, working hard, going to all your classes, getting good grades, you get a job, you go up the ranks, and you're in your middle age, and you look in your mirror and you're like, I hate this. Like, why am I doing this? Now, how does it happen? Because most people don't think about introspection, those things I was talking about before, and they just keep hitting targets. They keep achieving, but they're not getting the sense of fulfillment or happiness. But they can't get off the treadmill because now everyone expects them to go to the next level. And so the number one thing that I would say I wish I knew really early in my career is that you can't just succeed. You want to succeed with fulfillment, significance, happiness. And to do that, you need introspection, because you can and there are many, many people who end up successful and miserable. And it would just be better to be a failure and miserable. You wouldn't have to put in so much work. So that's the one thing that I tell you folks when they come to me. Look, do this for 2 years, put your head down, work as hard as you can, and then look up and say, is this right for me? And if it's not right for you, I'll do everything in my power to get you on the right path in life, because you don't want to end up successful and miserable. It doesn't matter if you have yachts to ski behind, if you have the big house and all the trappings of what you thought would be, your happiness.
Yep.
It is a failure. And the last thing I'll say is, if you think back to when we were all 5, 6 years old, most of us were happy. Like, we're happy. We're out playing with a brother or sister. We're in the playground. Oh my God, it couldn't get any better. And then we go through like 20 years of doing everything that we think is going to make us happy. We go to school, we work hard, we do this, right? And then you look at 25 and most people are less happy than they were at 5. So that's just poor self-management that we all do, right? And you say, well, there are more responsibilities, blah, blah. Yeah, but you shouldn't have to put in so much work to get less happiness and fulfillment. So it's something to do with how we're viewing our path, and we're not taking into account, is it right for me?
Yeah. And I think it is that definition of success, right? I just came back from a week vacation in Puerto Rico. We were staying with a friend that we did not know was in this $8 million condo. And the Bentleys, the Ferraris, all the things are in the parking lot. The condo's amazing. We're staying there for free. I'm like, I forgot how to be fancy, because I'm just used to flip-flops now. And so, but I looked around because that used to be my jam, right? Wall Street managing director, fancy apartment, big life. And I'm like, oh my God, this is like the last thing I want for myself. And, and she was stuck in this bubble. She couldn't talk to her neighbors because they were all so private. And, I'm like, that is not the life that I wanted for myself anymore, which is why I cashed out and moved to a tropical island. But I do think that giving ourselves the permission to change the definition of success is important. And there are so many external influences that come in that you should do this, you're expected to do that. And then the tools, the toys, the ex-spouses that we all pay for, all of those things get in the way. And then money becomes the main factor. And so it's fun to, as an adult, with hindsight now, be able to re-examine, what does success look like for me? And I think COVID required a lot of people to do that, because all the fun was taken out of life. And all you got to do was work. And if you were fortunate enough to still have a job. And when you realize that this is soul crushing every single day without any shiny objects to help defer that experience, people are really starting to think there is a better thing for me. I just don't know what that is. And
you're really good you're really good at helping people to identify that. So if anyone is at that state in their life where they're kind of comfortably unsatisfied, nothing's really wrong, but you're just not lit with life anymore. You don't have anything to fire those engines again. You're just kind of in orbit. Everything's cool. Like, I got a roof over my head. No one's complaining, but inside you're like, there's got to be more. Tammy's really good with helping people get that. And the other thing I'll say is, right, it's, it's natural for people to go through that process, right? Because really a good question you need to ask yourself, now this one is going to be like, it's going to hit home. Like, who are you so eager to please? Most people, it's like their parents or their older brother or older sister. And here's the thing, that's cool when you're 12 and 13. You want to get good grades for mommy and daddy. But when you're 25, 30, 35, and you still can't make decisions in your life because you can't liberate yourself from their expectations, even though they might not even overtly say that. That's where you need to really spend time with introspection and say, why is it so important for me to live a life that I think pleases them instead of the life that pleases myself? Tammy's really good at helping get through that.
Yes. I thought I was crazy moving to a tropical island. Probably a little right, but
you are crazy.
It worked out.
But I want to be crazy like that.
That's right. So, all right, one last question that I want to open up for Q&A, because I know that these guys have a ton of questions for you as well. So at CWC, our big thing is helping people become the CEO of their careers. Because I believe that when you look at your career and treat it like a business, you make different decisions, you show up differently, and you have different outcomes. So what does being the CEO of your career mean for you?
You have to own your career. What do I mean by that? When I came out of the military, big thing was we were all kind of silent professionals, right? You wanted to fly the helicopter well, be precise, on time, and you never really went to seek someone's, confirmation. In other words, you didn't want to self-promote. You didn't want to self-advocate for yourself. And that works in the military because it's a fair system and it's very open and transparent. But sort of in the corporate world or most jobs, there is a level of self-advocacy that you need. And so when you're the CEO of your business, of yourself, you recognize that people have to understand what you're doing. Now, you have to find a dignified way, consistent with your personality, to share those types of things with people. But, you know, just being the quiet professional and expecting that you'll be rewarded, when many times what you think is worthy of reward may not be high on someone else's list. So the CEO of your career means you have to own it. You have to go out and build relationships. You have to figure out where you can help other people. You have to advocate for yourself. You have to own mistakes when you make it. There's a lot of credibility that exists, you know, if you pass the buck when something goes wrong. And so a big part of being a CEO is just recognizing that, you know, you are in control of your destiny, and you're also in control of figuring out which path you should be on. Everyone comes to a fork in the road and you're like, oh my gosh, should I go left or right? Should I go left or right? Okay, stop. Analyze who you are, which sounds better. Pick a path, go down that path. I promise you there will be another fork soon, and then there will be another fork. Life is a series of decisions. Being the CEO is taking ownership of each one of those forks in the road. And when you take it, take it. Like, don't look back. The chapter's closed. And then when you get to the next fork, take all the lessons you've learned as the CEO of your own business and move to the next one. The last thing I'll say on being the CEO of your own career is learning how to think about how to sell or tell your story, right? I told a little of my story early on. No one fights for bullet points on a resume. No one cares if you were magna cum laude at Harvard, right? That's great. What people care about is, what did it take for you to become magna cum laude at Harvard? What were the challenges? What was the calling for you to go to Harvard? What were the struggles, right? The hardship? What was the, you know, the point where you turned it around? You have to tell your story in a way that there is a calling, there is a journey, and then there's an outcome. Like, if you can't tell your story, you cannot be the CEO of your firm. So think about ways to tell your story in a way that connects with other people, right? I was in the military. Maybe Drew was in the Peace Corps. We're not different. We both serve something that's higher than our own personal selfish interest. So if I want to tell the story to Drew, and I know she knows nothing or doesn't want to know anything about the military, I tell the story in a way that hits on the things that I know are important to her. In other words, we both care about something larger than ourselves. So you have to learn how to tell your story. That's really important in being a CEO. There's all sorts of apps and people like Tammy out there to help you learn how to tell your story in a way that connects with people broadly, not just specific people in that same field like the military.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that, because everybody's journey is different, and understanding like how you want to own that CEO spot is also unique to all of our journeys as well. So before we open it up for Q&A, just a few public service announcements, and then we'll go ahead and roll into Q&A. So I saw something in the chat about what's the name of Frank's book. So it is, I just had it in front of me, Frank. Sorry about that. Why don't you tell us what it is? It is Life's Lessons from the Cockpit.
Yeah. Life Lessons from the Cockpit.
That's right.
It's, if you just type my name into Amazon, then it'll pop up, Frank Van Buren. But again, you know, it's just a series of short stories, and the whole idea is, you know, I wanted to share some of the, you know, there's some funny stories in there. There's some crazy harrowing stories when I almost got myself and everyone killed. But it's all about, it's not about glamour. It's more about, you know, how I learned that adversity and hardship are the key points to learning.
That's excellent. And it's a great read. Highly recommend that. And also for those of you here today that are not waking up on fire, excited about what you're doing, because you came today, I am offering everybody who's here a complimentary career strategy session. So if that's something that you think you're interested in, you can either email me or reach out to me on LinkedIn, but you'll get a worksheet to think about and start to get some ideas together. We're going to meet and really solve one problem you're struggling with today. And then you'll leave that conversation with the Ultimate Career Strategy Guide, which is going to give you the tools to really think through what came out of that coaching session and really where you want to take your career so that way you get fired up every single day. So Frank, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for joining us. And I want to open it up for Q&A. So who has their first question for Frank? Just feel free to come off and mute, and we'll roundtable questions. All right, Will, I see you off mute first. Oh, we'll go Will and then Tammy. How's that?
Okay, all right.
Great.
Frank, when you were talking about leadership and you were talking about skill sets that you are hiring for when you're trying to put people in the best places that they can succeed, do you still look for leadership skills or traits that they can have so you can leverage those at a later point, even though what you need them to do in the beginning is just technical skills?
It's a complicated answer. The answer is, from a long-term perspective, the answer is yes. From a short-term perspective, most hiring managers are thinking about things in a very efficient way, like the next 3 to 5 years. So if I say in 3 to 5 years, it's not important, I'm making this up now, that Will has strong leadership skills. Again, I'm not talking about self-leadership. I'm talking about leadership like you and I think of somebody leading troops in combat or some great leader, right? Then I probably place that at a lower level. But remember, I want to hire for the top 3 attributes that I think are going to be most indicative of success in the job that I'm hiring for. Think about it this way. You have Maya Angelou, a poet, right? And you have Neil Armstrong, astronaut, landed on the moon. Both have been extraordinary Americans, right? Right? We would both say, wildly successful. Wow, they're just, but does anyone in this chat window think that they are interchangeable? In other words, Neil Armstrong can move the world with oratory and poetry, and Maya Angelou can, command a spaceship that goes to Mars, the moon. Maybe they have the capacity, but we know that talent, exceptional performance, is not necessarily interchangeable. This is a very big concept, and it's controversial because when you're little, your parents say, don't worry, Frankie, you can be great at anything. Just put your mind to it and work hard. And that's really good for us to say when they're little, because I'm a father of 3 kids. You want them to feel like the world is their oyster. But everyone in this chat window realizes that's not really true, right? Everyone can't be great at everything, but everyone can be really good at something. The question is, in your lifetime, can you identify that? There are people with natural, qualities of empathy that are just better at everyone else in how they connect with people. And so the key, Will, is probably in the short, when I hired Shashin, I wasn't necessarily looking for leadership. If he had it, that was great, right? I was looking for intellectual capacity. Like, was he a demonstrated problem solver in school, right? Did he enjoy the rigor of digging down in and analytically? That's what I need. That's what I need. Now, if later on he emerges as a leader, that's even better. And there's always a percentage that will, but I didn't hire him for that.
Yeah.
I'm being honest. That's the candid approach.
Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic. And Tammy.
Hey, Frank, long time no see.
Tammy's awesome. We've connected via social media for at least since I started the book, and she's an outstanding, wonderful human being. So good to see you.
Oh, thank you so much. You mentioned your leadership videos in your Instagram account. Can you tell me how I can go find those and listen to them every day?
Yeah, the best way to do it is to go to YouTube, which no one ever goes to. So if you go to YouTube and just type in Frank Van Buren, 165 are there. Now, what I did was I loaded them all later. No one really looked at them on YouTube, but that is the easiest way to get to them. I was doing them on LinkedIn. So I guess if you went to my LinkedIn and then went backwards.
Okay.
Oh, YouTube is so much easier, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah. That way they can watch continuous. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So they're
Thank
all
you.
there. They're all
Great talk today. Thank you. Good to see you.
there. Good seeing you, Tammy.
All right. Who else has questions for Frank?
Hey, Frank, it's Jason. How are you?
What's up, Jason? Jason's a long-term colleague at Wells Fargo.
So, and to your point around sort of connecting all places, I'm actually outside Charleston on spring break. So,
Excellent.
so question for you in terms of, you talked about sort of looking at your opportunities and sort of don't be afraid to fail and kind of failure and sort of adversity kind of being those learning opportunities. But as you sort of progressed through your career, and you've sort of built a life, built a family, and have sort of broader responsibilities than you did at an earlier stage in your career. How has your thinking about sort of taking those risks changed?
Well, that's a really good point, right? Because life and responsibilities, and we both share fatherhood, and the demands of providing, et cetera. The way I approached it was different at the age in my 50s than it would have been at the age of 25, when I was obviously by myself and had no one that I was accountable to. And the way I thought about this, at the age of 52, after Dwayne died, and I thought about what I wanted to do, I said, I'm not going to blow up my family's security by on day one just quitting and running somewhere, right? And doing something that changed the entire makeup of what we were doing in providing, et cetera. But what I said is, let's start doing things that I know are consistent with fulfillment, it's consistent with my attributes. And as I do those on the side, I want to ramp those up to a point. And this is where Tammy's really good, like thinking about how to synchronize and not just say, I quit today and you run. Well, you can't do that when you have responsibilities. But what you can do is you can get involved in your free time. You say, well, I don't have any free time. Cut out the Netflix, cut out the, blah, 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 blah. Next thing you know, you got 3 hours every day, right? So take those 3 hours and then try to figure out how to get involved in things that matter to you in whatever capacity you can. And as you get more and more involved, new things will come about. I said I was going to give 30 speeches. That led to, the book, and the book led to 365 videos, and 365 videos led to this job as a development officer. When you might know David D'Annunzio, global head of mergers and acquisitions. When I first interviewed with him, he looked at my resume and he said, okay, help me out here. You've been a revenue producer for 21 years at Wells Fargo. You were an investment banker. You cover the largest, buy-side accounts, hedge funds, et cetera. Why do you now want to do this job? And I told him the story about Dwayne and he said, makes total sense. You're hired. It was literally like that. Like you have to think about how you can work your way in. And Tammy might have some other ideas, but the key is it's hard at our positions, right? Everyone, with the exception of maybe Shasheen, who's just starting, it's hard for someone who's already has a lot of obligations just in one day to switch everything, but you should be moving towards where you want to go. And there's a lot of strategies on how you set that up. You lower your cost and, you think about how you can get involved, et cetera.
Yeah, and I'll tag into that a little bit, Frank, too. And I know, Jason, you've had a conversation or two, around that topic, is really to find those opportunities where the skills that you've built throughout your career are in high demand and in short supply. Because the things that you've learned, the battle scars, the time-tested things that you bring to the table naturally are desperately needed in other industries and are not organically present in many industries. And I'll give you a really quick example, and then, just so you have a sense of what I'm talking about. So one of the biggest moves I ever made was running a professional services organization for a software development company. So the salespeople would make promises that the software never did what it did. And my guys had to go all over the world and try and make that happen. And so I managed sales teams, recruiters, technology people, all of this stuff. So I had that consulting mentality for all the big houses on Wall Street. And I made a pivot to the infrastructure group at Bank of America. Now, I knew nothing about infrastructure, and I actually didn't care about it, as it turns out. And I knew nothing about tech, even though I was in that space. I was a salesperson. But what I did know how to do is I knew how to run a centralized organization that serves many high priority customers at the same time. And because I built my career knowing that, what the Bank of America was going through at the time with their infrastructure group is they were moving from a decentralized model to a centralized model. And as you might imagine, everyone was having a fit because the CIB did not want to share with retail bankers, and everybody was special, and my hardware was special, and the CIO of the group was getting clobbered. And because I knew how to do that, and out of 400,000 people at the time, no one could figure this out, that's where I made my biggest leap. Was being able to come in with that I had no idea the industry from the insiders or technology or infrastructure, but I knew how to run a good centralized organization to serve many masters, and that's what high demand. And so there's opportunities like this everywhere.
That's
Once
right.
you figure out where's your superpower and who needs it the most. So
Yeah.
hopefully that helps a little bit.
And the flaw that most people have, Jason, is when they think about their superpowers, they say, okay, I've been doing this job as a high yield bond salesperson. These are the tasks I do on a daily basis. And that's the wrong way to look at it. The way to look at it is what has been required, what attributes, what behaviors are required for me to have succeeded in that, and where would they be valuable, which could take me to a nonprofit, something totally different, but maybe the ability to, to be a win-win consensus builder on the trading floor is the same that's needed to go into a village, in a hostile area and get two villagers to work together to build something for the common purpose of school. So you have to use a broad view of what are the things you do well, and then say, where else might they apply? So don't think of it only, what are the tasks that I do? Say, what am I bringing to the table that's valuable, could be valuable elsewhere.
All right, excellent. Well, we are at the top of the hour. Frank, as always, it's good to see you. Thank you for your time and your stories and your insights and all of those things. I know I had a great time. I think everybody else did too. And for those of you that are still on, you're going to get an email. So feel free to rate this and let us know what you thought and what other content you want us to bring. And we'll see all of you very soon. Thanks again.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Very good.
Bye.
Thanks, Frank. Thanks, Tammy.
See you.
Thanks.
Pleasure.